Here's everything I've learned about how to plan an interesting route for a motorcycle trip. Planning an adventure should always start by looking at a map. So to head over to your map making tool of choice, I use MyRoute. First you want to start off getting together a rough shape and time for your journey, dropping waypoints at every place that either you have to or you want to visit. Start points, end points, ferries, border crossings and any other locations that you want to visit. These are your non-negotiables. That gets you a rough shape and, crucially, a total journey time for the route. Now you'll start tweaking and sculpting your route down. So the goal from here on in is to strike a balance between making progress, finding interesting roads, and fitting it all in however long you've got for your trip. Clearly though, the initial route is optimised for the fastest, most direct, and so the most boring roads, which obviously no one wants when they're on tour. The next job is to hunt around for interesting roads, which can feel like a bit of a dark art, but it doesn't have to. If you look at the map, there's plenty of clues to show you where to find the gold. Specifically, I'm looking for 3 telltale signs. The first is looking at the terrain satellite view to see the geology of an area. Forests, lakes, rivers, mountains, and all those features that make the riding good. Next I'm looking at the road view, on the hunt for the most isolated, most lonely roads that I can find. And of course the old rule of thumb holds up, the more squiggly a line is on the map, the more fun you'll find. Saying that, all 3 of those rules are just general principles, so use Google Street View to go in and get a closer look at different points on the road. Keep an eye out for things like road surface, scenery, traffic. It'll just give you a sense of how good the road is and how valuable it is for your trip. Then what I might do is have a poke about online for any recommended roads in the area. So if you're heading to the Alps, for example, you could always check out my video trip for some absolutely rock solid road recommendations. Okay, now if you're not onto this already, Michelin maps are my favourite maps, and for one reason: the green-lined scenic routes. These are hand-picked by experts for being good driving roads. And handily, if you're on MyRoute, you can select Michelin as a base map view here. So however you find your routes, you can start to plan them on your map, connecting the waypoints together and confident you're taking roads that are worth your time. Now your route will have got a lot more interesting, but it'll also have got a lot longer and less direct too. So now what you need to do is keep going back and forth, tweaking and sculpting a route together that balances interesting roads with making progress, and while doing all that in a time frame that fits with your trip. If you stick with all the back roads, it'll be fun, but you won't get that far. So it's a case of picking when to push on and when to detour. Part of that's how interesting a certain area is, but mainly it's a matter of how much time you've got. If you're heading down to the Alps, you probably don't want to spend half your trip getting there. So most people will choose to take the hit and sit on a highway just to buy themselves more time on the alpine roads. But if you follow those rules and you know what to look for on the map, it's not actually that difficult to find a good driving road. But the trick to striking the right balance is making good progress. An easy mistake to make, especially on long distance trips, is finding nice little patches of driving roads but then linking them together using the highways, which you can never fully avoid. But to really hit that sweet spot between scenic and high speed, what you want to find are roads where you can cover distance while still feeling like you're travelling and not just sitting on a motorway. But play about with Google Maps, connect known destinations together, then select the option to avoid highways. That'll give you a few suggestions, which you can then drag around on the map to get different options. Just keep an eye on the time and jump into Street View to evaluate the best option. The roads don't always have to be Hollywood roads, but there's a lot to be said for finding a road where you can make good progress. It'll be slower than the highway, but you'll have a view and corners, and that will keep your mind and your eyes occupied and entertained, which really does make a massive difference. As I say, it's a back and forth process, linking together roads and destinations, adding some roads to increase interest and then taking some off to save time. And it's with time in mind that you need to start pruning your route down to fit your schedule. Your mapping tool gives you the total trip time, but as you're finessing the route, you need to start breaking it up into individual days. And for that, there's a few things that you should consider. First, it's good to know how far you can travel in comfort in one day and know that before you set off. Be honest with yourself about it and cut your cloth accordingly. Pace and riding stamina varies between riders, but on average, you want to be aiming for a daily trip of around 200 to 300 miles. And if you're working your daily schedule out using units of time, don't forget to give yourself an hour on top of whatever the route planner says for fuel and food breaks, and maybe more too if you're at risk of hitting traffic. Whatever time or mileage target you have for an average day, you might want to make that day an exception, whether that's to sacrifice a day to cover more distance or just to get off the bike and have a bit of a rest. Over a long trip, rest days really do help to reduce fatigue, not just for the body but the soul too. So consider putting some time aside to stretch your legs and your lungs, explore the surroundings and make some memories that don't involve tarmac. Rest days might stop you from travelling as far overall and might even seem like an extravagance, but if you can, I'd recommend taking a day off the bike about every 3 days of riding. Normally, where you stop each evening will be somewhere that interests you, obviously, a certain city, historical site, natural wonder, but you might want to stay near the beginning of a mountain pass so that you can get a clean run first thing in the morning before all the traffic arrives. And perhaps you've identified an area that you can spend a few days exploring. So you might want to find a base to stay for a few days where you can drop off your luggage and enjoy the ride without the extra weight on the bike. But wherever you choose as a location to stay, those are key waypoints to identify a daily target. Getting these daily targets is a milestone. The picture of your route becomes clearer and you get more and more detail which you can narrow down where everything's just serving a daily objective. And having a daily destination to target, everything takes on a much more natural and manageable form. It also means when you're on the trip, you've got something to measure your progress against, so you always know if you're behind or ahead of schedule. But here at the planning stage, it really helps with that back and forth process where you're adding and removing roads to tweak your journey. For longer trips, what I like to do once I've got a rough route and I've started to block it out into daily chunks, I'll duplicate it and trim each map down into 3-day segments that I can use between rest days. Not only does that mean that I can export individual GPX files for that leg of the trip, but it's a lot easier to finesse and manage the route as you go along. And then you don't need to worry about exceeding any waypoint limits on GPX files either. While we're talking about GPX files, MyRoute, which by the way I'm in no way sponsored by, but they do have an excellent feature in their premium tier where you can set the mapping database to use TomTom's or Garmin's proprietary maps, so you can be confident that the road that you see online will be identical to the one on your sat-nav. When you're using Google Maps or OpenStreetMaps, you can find the occasional discrepancy with the map that's built into your sat-nav. When I import my GPX files into my Garmin, there's a choice to either import it as a turn-by-turn route or a path, which is the one that I use. Because the path shows you the route on the map and where you are in relation to it, it gives you a bit more flexibility to follow your nose, and it does all that without nagging you every turn. Accommodation. Okay, so once you've got a destination for each day, then you can start looking at accommodation to book ahead of time if you're confident that you'll make it. And if you're staying in a popular tourist destination, then that's probably a good idea anyway. For the most part though, I won't be put off by using booking.com or Airbnb or something on the day to find a place to sleep if you need that flexibility. It all comes down to getting that balance between flexibility and organisation. And that's usually up to you, your situation, your preference and your personality. As you might gather, personally I lean towards organisation where possible, but then again I love the route planning almost as much as I do the trip. That's how I plan a route anyway. Hopefully it helps you plan yours. All these lessons I learned on my first solo trip, which you can watch right here. And if you found the video useful at all, please drop a like. Otherwise all my stuff will remain forever hidden, forever unmonetized. And if you've got any travel advice, please leave that in the comments section below. Thanks for watching. Till next time.